The bells of the convent rang for the last time, their tones trembling across the hills of Thessaly, where olive trees shivered beneath the chill of autumn. Within the weathered walls of the fading chapel, a small group of nuns gathered. Their prayers floated beneath cracked frescoes, where the faces of saints had long been scraped away by age and sorrow. Across the distant horizon, fire shimmered. Ottoman banners, red and striking against the mountains, rippled like sparks carried on the wind. The sisters understood the meaning immediately. No messengers would arrive from nearby towns. No soldiers remained to protect them. Between the convent and the approaching empire lay only silence. Sister Eleni of Lissa, their abbess, stood before the altar, holding a silver crucifix that had endured a century of storms. Her voice was steady, but the tremor in the chapel betrayed her own fear. "If they break through our walls, keep your vows within your hearts," she whispered. "That is something they cannot take." She was wrong. When the Ottoman forces reached the convent gates, vows and prayers offered no protection. By sundown, the first stones of the chapel began to crumble. The hymns that once filled the air were drowned beneath iron, fire, and screams. The Ottomans wasted no time with arrows. They shattered the gates with cannon fire, declaring that this place of prayer would no longer shelter defiance. To them, the convent was rebellion itself, a cross raised defiantly over conquered soil. Inside, the sisters worked frantically to hide relics, silver chalices, embroidered icons, and fragments of saints' bones beneath the chapel floor. They hoped that even if their bodies were taken, their faith might survive. But the soldiers sought more than gold or relics. They wanted proof, evidence that they had crushed not just armies, but the God these women served. By nightfall, the surviving nuns were herded into the courtyard. Torchlight flickered across their white habits, turning them into ethereal figures of gold and shadow. They were to be brought before the Pasha, a promise seldom fulfilled. What followed became legend so grim that church chroniclers refused to write it fully. By dawn, the convent lay in ashes. Smoke drifted from the refectory, once a place of silent prayer and shared bread. Ottoman banners hung from the bell tower, signaling that resistance had ended. Yet, in the courtyard, something extraordinary happened. The soldiers, expecting tears and screams, instead heard singing. Bound in ropes, the surviving nuns began to chant, not hymns of despair, but songs of defiance. Agnus Dei, Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Their voices shook but did not break. The Ottoman captain, uncertain whether to laugh or strike them down, demanded the abbess be brought forward. Eleni still clutched the silver cross she had saved. The captain offered her mercy, renounce her God, accept the empire's faith, and her sisters would live. Her reply was simple, resolute. "I have already given my life. What else can you take?" The captain hesitated, perhaps moved for a moment, then turned away. What followed remains largely unrecorded. Even Ottoman records, which glorified victories in meticulous detail, described the sisters' fate only as a matter of discipline. But Sister Eleni's name survived in letters that crossed Europe, the nun who would not kneel. By midday, the convent's bells had been melted into coin, and the rooftop cross shipped east as a trophy. Yet whispers spread through nearby villages that at night, the wind carried women's voices. Not crying, but praying. The survivors, 22 women, were driven south toward the coast. Their ankles were bound, the sun scorching their backs, Ottoman horsemen following closely. They were no longer captives of war. They were proof of conquest, living trophies demonstrating the empire's power. Those who fell were lifted by others, veils shielded from trample, small acts of dignity in a world stripped of mercy. 7 days later, they reached the port of Volos. Ships awaited them, vessels built not for comfort, but for control. The women were shackled to wooden benches, bound alongside criminals and slaves. The overseer, Yusef Aga, meticulously recorded everything in his ledger: cargo, coins, spices, and now, religious captives. This ledger, discovered centuries later in Istanbul, confirmed that what many had dismissed as legend was fact. The voyage lasted 12 days. Storms battered the deck, salt burned wounds, hunger hollowed faces. Yet what truly broke the women was not the storm, but the silence. No one spoke to them except to bark commands. They became ghosts, drifting between sea and sky. The youngest, Sister Magdalena, whispered psalms beneath her breath. Her voice, barely audible above the waves, seemed to slow the motion of the sea itself, momentarily stilling even the tempest. When the ship entered the Bosphorus, the skyline of Constantinople emerged, domes and minarets gleaming like blades at dawn. The city, long called the world's desire, now loomed as a cage. They were paraded through narrow streets, past merchants, soldiers, and slaves. Christian nuns among captives were rare, and people paused to stare. In the shadow of Hagia Sophia, they were forced to kneel. As the muezzin's call echoed from the minarets, one sister whispered, "We are home, but it is no longer ours." Before dawn, the women were taken to the Divan-i Humayun, the imperial council, where the sultan's will was absolute. Here, captives were judged not by kings or priests, but by empire itself. The Grand Vizier sat at the center, expression unreadable. Scribes waited with parchment and ink, ready to record names, ages, and intended uses. Barefoot, torn, and silent, the sisters were told they could live if they accepted conversion, adopting new names, food, and privileges. Those who refused would face the discipline of faith. Sister Magdalena trembled, recalling the fates of other captives. Greeks, Armenians, Slavs, who vanished without trace. Before the guards could seize her, Sister Theris stepped forward, her voice quiet but unwavering. "My lord," she said, "you may rename us, but you cannot rewrite the prayers we carry." The interpreter hesitated, translating the words. The vizier's face remained cold. "Prayers fade when the tongue forgets how to speak them," he replied. The sisters were dismissed to the lower chambers of Topkapi Palace. Not a dungeon, but a slow unmaking. Light barely reached the stone corridors. The women were stripped of habits, given coarse garments, their hair cut short, rosaries taken. They swept floors, sewed garments, tended fires, sanctity transformed into servitude. Yet the Ottomans had underestimated them. Hunger, solitude, and labor were not new. To these women, suffering was devotion made flesh. At night, they whispered prayers in secret, scratched verses into walls, or carved symbols into stone. They counted days not by empire calendars, but by the rhythm of the muezzin, marking time for the God who refused to abandon them. Rumors spread among palace servants, silent women beneath the palace, unbroken, unyielding. Their stillness spoke louder than prayer. Days blurred into months. Hands blistered, bodies wore thin. Each disappearance of a sister hardened the remaining women's resolve. Sister Theris, pale and thin, responded to guards with a smile, saying, "Call me Silence." From that moment, none spoke. In stillness, they reclaimed the control the empire sought to strip away. By spring, only 11 of the original 22 remained. Guards called them ghosts, servants whispered of saints. Beneath the palace, they discovered a hidden chamber under a loose slab, a small chapel. Broken pottery became candle holders, scraps of linen and altar cloth, shards of a mirror fashioned into a crude cross. Here they prayed in whispers, offering memories of their convent. The sound of the olive trees, the warmth of bread. These memories became their psalms. Years later, a Venetian prisoner would write of strange voices echoing beneath the palace, singing in Latin to a god not of the empire. Historians dismissed it as superstition, until archaeologists unearthed a chamber, its walls lined with Christian carvings, crosses, and symbols of birds and flames. One phrase remained, carved deep lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Sister Magdalena had marked the walls with charcoal birds for those alive, flames for those lost. Even starved and broken, the women moved with calmness that unsettled their overseers. Their secret worship continued, months or perhaps years, enduring in the darkness. By the time a new sultan rose in 1482, only a few sisters remained. Yet beneath the palace, their sanctuary endured. Silence had become defiance, prayer had become resistance. Centuries later, archaeologists found fingerprints, delicate but strong, left in mortar. These women had lived, prayed, and died in secret. Faith carved into stone, unyielding. The small chapel transformed understanding of religious resistance in the Ottoman Empire. It proved that devotion needs no witnesses, only persistence. Letters, poetry, and whispers carried their story, and the faint marks remain today, testimony to courage, endurance, and faith. The walls still bear their fingerprints. Symbols of birds and flames linger, faint yet legible. A calendar etched in scratches marks days survived. A final circle pressed into plaster, perhaps Magdalena's, perhaps another, speaks across centuries. Even in silence, they spoke. Even in darkness, they left light. Their names may have been erased, but their story endures, written in stone, whispered in the wind, and remembered by those who know that faith and courage need no audience. Light shines in the darkness, and it always will.